For today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to trim your cups. When trimming, you want to have a variety of sizes of loop tools, either a needle tool, bamboo stick, or some type of rubber rib. Notice the difference between these two bowls between a unfinished on the left and a finished trimmed with a recessed foot on the right. See, the same with cups. It has a much more finished, defined look as well as more even weight when you pick them up. See the difference here? This one is starting to turn white. This one is leather hard. If it's turning white, it is too dry. If it has a residue when you touch it, it is too wet to trim. Looking at this diagram, you can see with the smiley faces and kind of where that pink is where you want to trim off the extra weight that you needed for stability while it was drying. So I'm going to pick up this particular cup. I'm just kind of inspecting for the thickness so I can have a general idea from the bottom to the creases, so that way I know for sure how much I need to take off by the feel. Using some plastic clay, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to measure the inside. So looking at the diagram, from the curves that go from the base to the curves of the wall is the width of the foot that I would like for my cup form, or if I was making a bowl. Is a little different for plates, keep in mind. Okay, so I'm just measuring that interior space, just kind of adjusting my little coil. Once I get the size of it, I'm going to set it off to the side so I can use it again later. So just like when you are actually going to wheel throw, you do want to actually center this on the wheel. So I'm going to use the rings on the wheel head to kind of guide myself through. So it doesn't matter if you're at a kick wheel or electric wheel, you always want to center first. I try not to look at the very bottom of my piece, especially if it was a little jagged from cutting off the wheel head in the first place after throwing. I try to look a little bit lower than that. If your rim is not even, you'll not be able to center very well, and you'll have to trim up your rim by hand before going onto the wheel head to trim. Sometimes it goes quickly, sometimes it takes a little bit. So just like when you check your fingers to make sure that it's centered when you are throwing, you're going to do the same thing when tapping when you do your trimming. So I kind of move my fingers side to side to see how off it is. I don't just stick in one place, I'll typically go a little bit lower as well. Took me a little bit of time, so I cut a little bit of that off. Another reason you need your plastic clay here is to secure it onto the wheel head. I always start with 2. If you do not do 2 at once, you're going to shift your cup from center. So make sure that you're pushing up against and then down. So up against and then down onto the wheel head. You don't need to cover the entire base. You want to be able to take this off fairly easy. The first tool I'm going to use is my large loop tool. Typically I'll use my triangle loop tool to kind of clean up the very bottom in case it was a little jagged. You never want to scrape. You already have the wheel moving, you don't need to scrape. So that's why I was showing you not to do that. And it should be coming off kind of like shaved chocolate. So kind of ribbon-like. After I clean out the base, I'm going to clean up the sides a little bit so that way they are even. After I've cleaned up the sides and the top, I will start going in and actually taking the extra weight off. I just want to make sure I have it even and I don't have those jagged edges anymore. I kind of flip around between loop tools. I'll go down the sides a little bit just to kind of even it out. I try not to push too hard as I go down because I know for sure that that thickness is proper. So at this point now that I've cleaned it up, I'm going to take my little measured coil. I'm going to lay it down so it's nice and even. I'm going to make a mark at the end, and that's how much weight that I need to take off. So I'll spin it around. I'll hover over one of those marks and make a little circle. If your piece isn't centered, your circle will not be centered either. So right now I'm going to take my double-sided loop tool. Notice I do have my hand on top. I've been doing that the whole time, just to make sure that way if it starts to move I can feel it. So at this point I'm taking that bottom part of that squared loop tool and I'm pushing it in so the tool itself goes vertical. And I'll create my little raised foot. And then that'll take off a lot of that excess weight. So I'm going to start moving down. So again, notice the ribbons coming off very nicely. It's not sticking. So just like it's really easy to do details at leather hard when you're hand building, you can do details such as this with trimming when it's at leather hard. Alright, just to kind of show you the angle, so I start off like this. So let's pretend my hand is the actual piece. So taking that bottom part and pushing in. So that's what I'm doing to create that raised foot effect. If you don't have a thick piece, obviously you could be very wary of cutting through. Occasionally you do see me tapping the piece. If the sides sound very dense and there's not a lot of sound bouncing around, you'll notice that it'll sound like it's really thick. And then when it starts getting a little higher pitched in sound, then you're starting to get to a better thickness. Now this is obviously different depending on the size of the piece, but for like a cup form you'll notice a distinct difference in sound. Alright, so doing the recessed foot, I made a little mark for an inner circle. I usually make that with about the width of my pinky to start with, and then I can go and adjust. Taking that little corner, pushing that in, and then I'm moving from the 3 o'clock to the center and back out again, flattening my tool. I always have my fingers of my non-dominant hand that I'm not actually trimming with, because this is usually where the piece will want to grab my tool and wiggle off, so I'm still pushing down. And kind of cleaning this up a little bit. I don't like to leave my feet very flat. I kind of like to round them. That's just a personal aesthetic for myself. If I wanted to, I could cut little grooves in this and make like a scalloped foot. I could just leave it flat. That is up to you. Now, note the recessed foot is optional depending on how thick your base is. If you have a really thick base, I would say it's less than optional. It's probably more you should really do it, just because you want your piece to feel more evenly weighted. I just use my finger to compress and kind of soften up some of those edges too. If your foot is too thin to start with, a recessed foot you would end up cutting through. So that's why I want you to make more than just one cup, because it's really hard to know after one cup if you're really doing it right, unless you're taking it off the wheel, putting it back on, taking it off. So it does take a little bit of practice. Alright, so just kind of cleaning that up. So I kind of do everything at about 3 o'clock. Taking my fingers, kind of compressing that foot again, just to kind of soften that a little bit. Just thinking the look as well as the function of the piece. Alright, the last thing that I'm going to do is you do get a little bit of a texture from carving away the grog, so I'm just using a rubber rib just to kind of compress that clay back down so it really smooths out the piece. And then if I have any weird lines, that kind of cleans that up as well. You notice I'm not trimming my rim. That should have been done when you were actually throwing the piece, taking care of any goofy textures or rounding that out, just because it's really hard to actually reach that area. Alright, so just compressing my recessed foot. Use my fingers to get in crevices I can't quite reach. Okay, so much smoother, good sound. I'm going to put my initials or your full name, that's up to you. I like to put the year, and then you guys should also put your block hour. really important for cup forms to write your initials. And the only way to really tell how you did is to pick it up, lift it, and it should feel like a nice even weight. In a separate video, I'll show you how to make handles, but just things to think about, any other texture designs, stamps, whatever you want to do. But two very different cups, but very fun. Hope you enjoy this project.